Why hello there, and welcome back to Tabletop Ferox. So, if you've kept yourself up on the latest goings-on in the tabletop gaming community, I'm really sorry that you've done that to yourself, but also you are likely aware of the 44 rules. But just in case you are not, the shortest version of it is a player posted to Reddit with a list purporting to be the new 44 rules that their GM has instigated as basically the conditions to continue the game after a hiatus. And of course, all of the popular tabletop gaming YouTubers and Twitterers and TikTokers maybe are discoursing about it because honestly, the items on the list range from perfectly reasonable to absolutely insane. But overall, a lot of people seem to be wanting to take the position that this list is an example of either a poor dedicated DM being pushed to their limits by unreasonable players who want to maliciously ruin their carefully crafted game, or a tyrannical dungeon master dedicated to crushing the poor spirits of the players under their ruthless heel and punish them for even attempting to have fun. Because honestly, taking a hardline pro player or pro DM stance is a really good way to appeal to an audience that wants someone who is going to tell them that whichever of those two groups they belong to are never at fault. So I decided that I should weigh in with my unique perspective as part of the 1% of TTRPG YouTubers who do not exclusively cover Dungeons & Dragons, and also someone who just doesn't give a fuck about telling players or game masters that they are always in the right. But before I get into the actual list, there are a few assumptions that I'm going to be working under, so I am going to outline them right here. First, I am assuming that this is real and has been posted without any changes, which, considering that we're talking about Reddit, is a big assumption. Second, this is an in-person game being held at someone's residence, not strangers online or at the local game shop or the community college game club. These are a group of adults who are voluntarily gathering together at a private residence where someone has the authority to say who is and is not allowed to be there. Third, I am assuming that every item on this list is a response to a thing that has happened at least once and are not preemptive strikes against imagined future slights. And finally, I am assuming that this game is Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. I don't think they ever said. So, without further ado, let's get into the 44 simple rules for playing my Dungeons & Dragons. I'll put this shit out right now that's going to change before anyone goes through with anything. 1. I'm timing turns. I don't give a fuck if it's unfair in your opinion because your spells are hard or you don't know what square to move to. You get 1 minute to know all the actions you want to take, or I skip your turn. So overall, this one is very reasonable, and I think the people who disagree are imagining some fantasy scenario where a poor first-time player fumbling cards and papers is cut off in the middle of their turn by this evil dungeon master, when, as someone who has been in a game where we had to enact timed turns because of one player, I can tell you from experience that it is almost certainly more along the lines of a player or players who are just completely checked out on their phone or even asleep until they hear their name called, and then suddenly it's just like, huh? Okay, what did I gotta do? Did that guy get hit yet? Where's the wizard? Oh, the wizard got killed? Okay, so okay, let me go to my character sheet. What can I do? What spells do I have? And look at the specific language here. 1 minute to know all the actions you want to take. That is 1 minute to move and declare your action, which is way more than enough time, regardless of how hard your spells are. And, you know, you should know your spells. Like, they shouldn't be a shock to you, they shouldn't be a surprise. You should already be familiar with them. Like, in the game I played where we had to have timed turns, the only person who even got close to using that entire minute of time was the one who wasn't asleep. Because here's the thing, that is 1 minute from the start of your turn. If you are present at the table, physically and mentally, you also have all of the other turns preceding your turn to think about what you want to do. If you're paying so little attention to the game that you're basically starting from zero every time your turn comes up, that is incredibly disrespectful to the game master and to the other players. But moving on, I promise I will not have this much to say about all of them. As I said, this is just one that I have personal experience with and know that it actually works and doesn't cause more problems. 2. If you want harder fights, bring a second character sheet or expect to twiddle your thumbs when you die. I'm not going to baby anyone. I can only assume what happened here is players complained about encounters being too easy, the dungeon master increased the level of the encounters, it went poorly, and then instead of discussing that, they just squabbled like children. Because yeah, fine-tuning the difficulty of combat counters can be a tricky thing, especially if you are dealing with hyper-specialized min-maxed builds that people got from Reddit. Like, that isn't ever specifically mentioned in the rules, but Reddit does come up multiple times, and I have a sneaking suspicion that that might be part of the problem, because the actual game is not designed with those characters in mind. 3. If you call me or my rolls unfair, I'll get up and go home. And if you gotta ride with me, you can find your own way back and suck it up. This one is really hard to judge because we don't know what unfair is in this situation. Like, is unfair having all of a character's equipment stolen while they're sleeping because they dared to talk back to the dungeon master? Or is unfair having in-game consequences for your in-game actions because players will call both of those things unfair? However, when it comes to rolls, yes, dice rolls cannot be unfair, they are random, that's like literally what they're there for. However, while rolls themselves can't be unfair, absolving yourself of responsibility because of dice rolls, numbers in a book, or any other, hey, it's not my fault, it's the mechanics, is just kind of a signature move of shitty DMs. Like, I have fudged so many dice rolls in my time running games, and I can tell you that every single one was for the player's benefit. The dice are not unfair, but preventing the results of the dice from affecting the characters in a way that is unfair is just, part of being a competent game master. 4. I'm gonna take your character's loot away as regularly as you want it given out. Rule 3 will apply here. Okay, so a lot of the time, taking away players' equipment is one of those stupid DM power trip things. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's no situation in which that is appropriate. If you get thrown into Hobgoblin Prison, they're going to take your stuff, and you are not going to get your stuff back unless you go out of your way to retrieve it while you're committing your daring escape. But that is a very specific situation in which your characters are reasonably having their equipment taken away. If you're just taking stuff from the players as punishment for in or out of game things they did that you just don't like, yeah, that's a dick move. 5. If you don't act out your persuasion or intimidation or any other social checks, you fail before you even roll. You fail immediately because you aren't even trying and you're making the game lame for everyone else. Okay, the DM is 100% in the right on this one. This is a role-playing game. Saying, I persuade the guard to let us in, rolls die, is not role-playing. It is clicking the persuasion box and waiting for a response. If you don't want to play the role-playing game, You don't have to. Nobody is sitting there forcing you to play. You can just go do something else. 6. If you don't pick up on cues for side quests, that's not my problem. Get over yourselves. It's not a video game. It's a role-playing pen and paper based game with miniatures. I'm not holding your hand if you choose not to pursue shit. I kind of agree on this one, but also kinda don't. Like, if you have prepared content, don't you want to steer the players towards that content so that they will engage with it and you won't have waste your time preparing stuff that will never be used? Like, yeah, players will absolutely just walk into a wall 5 times before taking a step to the left and walking through the door if you let them. That's why you, as the game master, are supposed to give them gentle guidance in their adventure to set them on the right path. 7. If you move to a square in combat, there's no takebacks. Okay, so this one depends. Personally, the way I like to do it is once you take your hand off the miniature, no takebacks. But up until that point, you can move back, move somewhere else. It's a helpful way to plan out your movement. However, if he's talking about literally as soon as you move into one square, you cannot move back, yeah, that is a little extreme. And also is going to just make turns take longer because players are just going to stare at the map, carefully plotting out their move in their head before they even touch the miniature, because if they move it even one square wrong, it can ruin their whole turn. As I said, instead of being able to just go, oh, 1, 2, 3, no, 2, 3, yeah. Like, that is faster and easier and better for everyone. 8. You tell every single person what you're doing before you do it. You don't fucking roll dice and then say you're casting Fireball. You tell us all. Yeah, another perfectly reasonable one. You declare your actions before carrying them out. You don't just roll a die, say 14, and have the DM have to ask you what you just rolled for. 9. I will give out exhaustion more frequently. If you argue, go home or you can actually fight me over it, or you can DM yourself. So I don't really know the exhaustion rules in 5th edition. I looked them up and they do kind of seem like one of those things that are more trouble than they're worth most of the time. But once again, is a situation that seems like it could go either way. Either A, the DM is taking every single opportunity to hand out exhaustion at every single point the book says that they could possibly do it, or B, they are handing out exhaustion at reasonable points and the players are just complaining every time it happens. 10. Every snide comment you make to an NPC will be remembered and paid back in triplicate. You all seem to believe there is little consequence. And another one where the DM is actually 100% right. Players love to talk shit to NPCs and expect that it will not affect the NPC's reaction to them. If you want NPCs to only exist as sources of loot and directions to the next plot point, then play Skyrim. The whole point of having a human-driven tabletop role-playing game in the year 2024 is that the human being running the game has the ability to radically change the world and characters within it in response to your actions, even if that happens to be negatively. 11. You will not be given a mega dungeon every session. A temple is not the size of a small city, neither is a cave. This shit will happen when it's natural and organic. Go play some roguelike if you want that. And yeah, another one that is very reasonable. Not every single adventure is going to be Tomb of Horrors. And I don't know, honestly, to me, it seems like having an expansive dungeon to explore for every single adventure would get boring. I want wilderness adventures and mountain adventures and a dungeon adventure sometimes, but also like other kinds of environments in which to experience the game. 12. The travel portion is done. You want to travel continents doing literally whatever you want, whenever you want? Go play World of Warcraft or play D&D with ChatGPT. This is the one that makes it most seem like it is the players who are the larger part of the problem. Because thanks to a certain form of media that is now most people's introduction to Dungeons & Dragons, there is a breed of player who does not seem to understand that the Dungeon Master is not just a wish fulfillment machine. That they are not playing an expansive open world game where their little guy can go anywhere and do anything on a whim, but rather a game that has been prepared ahead of time by the Dungeon Master. Like, I know from the comments on my videos that there is a surprisingly large number of people who think that the measure of a good game master is the lengths you are willing to go to not tell the players no. However, based on the previous rule about not holding your hand if you choose not to pursue shit, I have to wonder how much direction the players are actually being given in the game. Like, are they just not being handheld towards side quests, or are they not being given any meaningful direction towards anything at all, including the main quest? 13. If you're late with no good reason, I'm going to halve your character's hit points for the entire session. Yes, being late is bad, I don't condone it, but also having a character's hit points as punishment for being late is just kind of petty and stupid, and is going to hurt the entire party, not just the player. Although that might be the idea, hoping that the other players will get mad at the one who was late for, ruining the game that day, in which case it is even more petty and vindictive. 14. If you don't show up for no good reason, and that will be determined by me alone if no one else has the guts to say shit for fear of upsetting one another, the first time you find yourself losing either a whole level or up to 3 major items you own. The second time you do it in a row, you will be removed from the chat and group, full stop. I have no fucking time for people to not show up. Once again, reasonable request, pointless petty punishment. Like, taking a level away from a character makes everything more complicated for everyone, including you. As for the severity of kicking someone out of the group for not showing up twice in a row, that one really depends. Like, if we are talking no call, no show, everyone is just waiting and someone doesn't show up twice in a row, yeah, that's actually pretty fair to kick them out of the group. But if we are talking about a situation where someone is repeatedly having to cancel ahead of time, saying, hey man, I can't make it this week, then that is perhaps more a situation where you would want to sit down with that person and have a conversation about whether or not they are actually able to commit to a regular game right now. Because here's the thing, showing up late or just not showing up at all, that is disrespectful. It is disrespectful to the game master, it is disrespectful to the other players. When everyone gets together to do a thing, you've all kind of agreed to be there and do the thing. That's how, social interactions work. 15. If you get too stoned or drunk to play, I will go home without a warning. Your warning is here. Now, I've never had to deal with players who were too drunk or stoned to play, but I have dealt with people who are too stoned or drunk to just engage in basic social activity. And this is one where people are kind of making fun of him for saying, oh, if you do this, I'm just gonna go home. No, being around people who are just incoherently intoxicated is not a good environment, and you are right to leave. 16. If you get up for a bong or smoke or whatever breaks every 10 minutes, I will simply pack up and go home. I'm sick of waiting for every bloke to be at the table. Yeah, I didn't mention this at any point, but some of the language does suggest that this is a British game, which is weird because the British are usually so polite. But yeah, if it is that frequent, if someone is missing from the table every 10 minutes, yeah, that is the player's bad. That is a problem. Being at the table, physically and mentally, is pretty much the bare minimum of what should be expected from players while playing the game. And if people are taking a lot of breaks, maybe sit down and say, okay, everyone's taking a lot of breaks, so how about we take like a 10-minute break every 2 hours, and then everyone can leave the table at the same time and it won't interrupt the game. Of course, that is talking like adults, a thing that I'm pretty sure these people are just incapable of. 17. Guidance, divination spells, owls, and whatever spells I decide are too fucking stupid are banned. Outright. No more fucking guidance. I don't see what's wrong with guidance specifically. It might get annoying if guidance is just being used constantly, but overall, yeah, the DM does have the authority to ban spells, feats, classes, whatever they want. That's part of running the game. And I do have to assume that this specific seething hatred for guidance is linked to a specific incident or string of incidents. 18. You get one chance at a skill check. If you fuck up, your party doesn't get their chance to do the same check. Think careful who's good at what. Once again, yeah, this is a thing that the DM has the authority to decide. Like, I've had experiences with players who just kind of rolled every time a skill check was called for, sometimes not even knowing what they were rolling. So I find it incredibly possible that the players are just all trying to roll for every single check. But also, aren't there like specific rules about which skill checks can and cannot be retried? 19. Discussion of metagame details in-game will result in instant damage to your character. And another reasonable request, don't metagame, but with another stupid, pointless, petty punishment. 20. Rules lawyering fellow players is encouraged. Actuallying me will result in me telling you to fuck off. Weirdly enough, this one is actually fair because the only punishment is being told to fuck off, and as I've said for the last few, the DM has the authority to interpret the rules as they want, to take rules out, to add rules. That's part of tabletop role-playing games, and always has been. 21. You roll your dice within view of 2 players who aren't you standard. You roll them neatly and you roll them on the table. Failing to do these 3 things will auto-fail whatever you did. Arguing that you actually rolled validly when you clearly didn't is an automatic critical fail. Okay, so hiding your rolls is shady, flinging dice all over the place is annoying, and it sounds like both of those are happening at this table with some degree of regularity. 22. Instant death traps and mechanics are coming into place. If you call these things unfair moving forward, I will laugh at you and tell you to fuck off and cry some more. Well, looks like someone is OSR pilled. Like, here's a secret about DMing. You can actually just kill all the players at any time for any reason. Check it out, I'll do it right now. The ceiling collapses, burying you under thousands of pounds of debris. You die instantly or of thirst several days later. The end. That doesn't make you a good dungeon master. In fact, quite the opposite. More often than not, the tricky thing is keeping the characters alive. Without them knowing you are doing it. 23. I will not give you random magic items and vendors will not stock them. They are meant to be rare and hard to acquire. Okay, this one is actually a bit more complicated, because a thing that does get looked over a lot is that magic items are supposed to be rare. I'm not sure how true it is in 5th edition, but in other editions, they're supposed to be these legendary things that the average person is lucky to glimpse once in their entire life. If you draw a glowing sword when you're fighting a group of bandits, they're supposed to be in awe and terror that you have such a powerful +1 sword. And yes, this is another thing that the GM can decide. They get to decide how common magic items are in their game world. However, I assume that there is a certain assumption that players will have certain levels of magic items at certain levels, and that the game is balanced around that. Like, I know 4th edition was. 4th edition was very much balanced around the idea that you had certain level magic items at certain character levels, and I can only assume that 5th edition is at least similar to that. So if you are giving the players less magic items, then you need to take that into account when you're balancing the encounters. I'm just kidding, I don't think this guy balances encounters. 24. Random encounters in the form of random dragons or strange mysterious road trader or a band of goblin prostitutes isn't going to happen. Go play Baldur's Gate 3. Okay, so here's the thing. You cannot grind XP in D&D. You might want to try to grind XP in D&D because, like computer role-playing games where you can grind XP, D&D gives you a number that tells you how many experience points you need to reach the next level. And you might think, oh, we have this number, so if we make the number go up faster with some random encounters, then we will level up faster. And no, that is not how D&D works. In fact, having that number and being able to see it on your character sheet means that you actually can't have any unplanned encounters because they are going to screw up the experience point progression that has been planned out for the entire adventure. So this time, it's actually neither player nor DM, but experience points themselves that are at fault. And this is a topic that I plan to make an entire video on in the future. 25. I don't give 2 fucks what Reddit says about X or Y ruling. 26. I actually give less of a fuck what your mate's D&D group did. These two are basically the same, and yeah, it doesn't matter what PickleRick_420_ or your buddy Jim think about a particular rule, because they're not running this game. 27. Saying anything to me about other players not liking me or doing X or Y without them saying it directly to me will result in me kicking you out of the group. Don't use someone else to push your own agenda. I swear, it is getting very difficult to imagine this as a group of adults and not literal children. And even harder to imagine that they are like actual friends who voluntarily subject themselves to each other's company. 28. You're not to sit down and have a 2-hour discussion about what Samson from Bandora Secondary did 3 weeks ago when you come to play. Take the 15 to 20 minutes I use to set up and review my notes to talk to each other, then sit down to play. So here's the thing, you can hang out, that's allowed, you can hang out and not play D&D. Any other time than when you are playing D&D. You can continue hanging out after you are done playing D&D. That is also allowed. But when everyone is gathered together for the express purpose of playing Dungeons and Dragons, yes, there should be an expectation that you are going to play Dungeons and Dragons. 29. Saying shit like, guys, come on, we're not here to have fun, we're here to play D&D, this is serious business, is rude and dismissive of how much work I put into this. I will simply go home if I hear this shit. Like, yeah, that is rude and dismissive. At this point, I think we can confidently say that this DM is kind of an asshole, but also that they actually care about the game and are trying to put effort into it. But then if you are mocking them for trying to actually run the game that they prepared and you have all gathered to play, then you're the asshole as well. 30. Don't fucking order food randomly. We will eat together at a specific time or not at all. I don't want food shit all over my things. Once again, this is a thing that you can all discuss beforehand like adults. You know, like, oh, how about we play until 6:30 and then we break for dinner? Like, that's a conversation that you can have with the other players. That's allowed. 31. No food or drink near any of my D&D gear. If you wreck something, you can pay for it. I let one person trash my DM screen once and I never had it replaced by them. In fact, I had that person attempt to gaslight me into believing they didn't wreck my shit at all. I'm not stupid. You're an adult. Accept responsibility. Yeah, respect other people's property. That's not a hard thing to do. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't care that there's scratches and stains all over your stuff, you still need to treat other people's stuff with a base level of respect. And on this one, I've seen people saying things to the effect of, yeah, well, games get messy. If your things are so precious and you don't want them damaged, then just don't bring them. And no, that's maybe a proper response if we were dealing with dogs or toddlers, not adults. You should be able to trust adults to be around things without destroying them. Like, that is an incredibly low bar to have for just being a person who exists in a society. 32. Arguments between party members outside of roleplay will be resolved by me giving the definite ruling. If you don't like it, fuck off back home. And this is another one where it's like, okay, what do you mean exactly? Like, rules argument? Yes, DM has the authority. Lore argument? Yes, DM has the authority. Personal argument? No, DM does not have the authority. I mean, you probably shouldn't be bringing that up at the table, but the DM does not have the authority in that situation. 33. I don't give a fuck what they did in Critical Role, or what that one guy on Reddit said, or if you think that it's all make-believe so you can do whatever you want. The world I run works on internal rulings and lore I created specifically for it. So yeah, kind of part of the whole big point of playing the tabletop role-playing game instead of the video game is that different people can play the same game in radically different ways. That's actually a good thing. And it does sound to me like this particular DM has been very clear about the type of game that they are trying to run. And just to address actual plays in general, because they are a problem in general, for some reason people do not seem to understand that the reason that players in actual plays seem to have so much freedom is because they are actually working with the game master. I know, scandalous. The GM trusts them to know and respect the limits of what they can do without derailing the game, and as such gives them leeway to play within those limits. And if your GM does not give you that much freedom, it might be because you have not demonstrated that you can be trusted with it. TTRPGs are kinda like BDSM in that they work best when both sides know that they can put their trust in the other. 34. Every single person in the chat is having debuffs applied to their characters that should have occurred a long time ago. This will be specific to characters. So this is another one where we don't know most of the story in relation to what these debuffs are or why they should have occurred a long time ago. Like, is everyone getting a debuff because that'll learn them? Or is everyone getting a debuff because their characters are objectively broken? Like, Reddit has come up multiple times, and that just does happen to be the place where dozens of people will happily help you build a character to intentionally ruin the game for everyone else. 35. If you don't bring your sheet, you don't play. Yeah, that one is beyond reasonable. If you are coming over to play Dungeons & Dragons, you should at the very least bring the piece of paper that you use to play Dungeons & Dragons. 36. If you don't bring dice, borrow some. Yeah, bring dice or borrow some. Is there a third option I am unaware of? Like, are people showing up, sitting down, and then saying, sorry man, I can't roll, I don't have any dice. 37. When we play D&D, I'm not your friend. That doesn't mean you can treat me like an enemy during the game. It means I'm no longer being nice. Really? Are you sure that, like, you're their friend when you're not playing D&D? Because I'm getting a distinct impression that you are not. Like, I've run lots of games, and at no point did I feel that I ever had to turn off friend mode to properly run the game. Like, I was still friends with the people as I was playing. We were like, you know, playing a game together. I guess this is what we get for spending years romanticizing the idea of the Dungeon Master as this omnipotent, cloaked figure pulling the strings from the shadows, instead of just like a dorky kid in overalls. Like, the language here is very specific. That doesn't mean you treat me like an enemy during the game. Like, it seems here like they believe that the dynamic between players and Game Master is supposed to be openly antagonistic, but only in one direction. Like, the Dungeon Master is supposed to laugh as the players fall into no-save instant death traps, and the players are just supposed to go, "Dang, guys, you beat us again with superior Dungeons and Dragons skills." 38. If you treat me poorly in any way, shape, or form, after or during or before the game due to something that happened in the game, you're out. If you cannot separate the game from reality, I think you're a fucking moron and have little... I think you are a fucking moron and I have little time to deal with that energy. Once again, do you people like each other at all? Because normally, I would say that this one is fairly reasonable. You shouldn't hold a grudge against the Game Master because the dragon rolled a crit, or the goblin guide intentionally led you into an ambush, and then try and take it out on them outside of the game. But in this case, the previous 37 rules have not really given me any reason to believe that anything happening in this game on either side is even close to reasonable. And overall, this rule does just kind of boil down to, I am allowed to be as much of an asshole as I want during the game and suffer no consequences for it. You know, kinda like players who want to insult the king to his face and not get thrown in the dungeon. You know, don't want to suffer consequences for your actions. You see, what I did there is I went back to one of the previous rules and pointed out how now they want the privilege that they said the players were not entitled to. That's what we in the industry call a callback. 39. You will submit your spell list daily in-game. If you do not give me a spell list each day in-game, you will not be allowed to cast a single spell or cantrip in combat. I do not trust you guys to not use this against me. And another one where we just don't know what's going on behind the closed doors of this game. Like, yeah, the DM could be weird and paranoid about this, or the players might have actually given them good reason to not trust them. Just the same with requiring 2 witnesses for the rolls. And like, here's the thing, I have never even considered asking players to submit their spell lists, but also, I have never had reason to suspect that the players were lying about the spells that they had prepared. 40. If you do not mark off spell slots or you say something like, "I remember what I'm at," as a way to justify it, I will simply fail your spell, deal half your health damage to you, and say you have no spells to cast for the rest of the day. And yeah, this is another perfectly reasonable thing that players should be able to handle as part of the minimal effort required of them by the game. Like, if you cannot be bothered to properly track your spells, then maybe you're just not up to the task of playing a spellcaster. Maybe that particular type of character is a bit too challenging for you. Also, let's remember that at this particular game, players being drunk and high is apparently a problem, so yeah, you should not trust them to just remember how many spells of what levels they have cast during the day. But also, once again, pointless petty punishment is pointless and petty. Although I guess technically my suggestion of if you can't track your spells, maybe you shouldn't play a spellcaster, is arguably worse. 41. If you break literally anything, you can buy the replacement that day or not attend until you do. Yeah, reasonable. See Rule 31. If your adult friends cannot be trusted to be around anything without breaking it, the answer isn't don't bring anything you don't want broken. It's they need to learn how to not act like toddlers. 42. If you complain about the choice of music, I fully expect you to bring the whole playlist for the next session or to shut the fuck up. That one is surprisingly generous, like way more generous than I would be. If you don't like my selection of historically accurate Crumhorn Quartet music, that is a you problem. 43. Cannot stress enough how little I care about how you feel about my rulings from now on. And this one makes me start to sympathize just a tiny bit with the DM here, because it does sound like the sort of thing you would say after trying to talk about these problems with the players and just having your concerns dismissed, and just being done with the whole thing. Of course, any lingering sympathies I or you may have is immediately remedied by the last one. Oh, and Rule 44, I'm never just threatening you, I'm promising you. Because remember, they are allowed to treat the players as enemies and enact petty vengeance for anything in or out of game, just not the other way around. So that's it, and as I said in the beginning of the video, a lot of people really seem to want to assign fault in the situation to one side or the other. They want to say that the DM is a domineering control freak who's trying to crush the poor players' spirits, who are only trying to have fun and be their genuine, creative, beautiful souls. Or they want to say the players are all annoying, whiny piss babies who thinks that the DM's job is to generate an entire world on the fly to satisfy their every whim while refusing to put even the smallest amount of effort into the game themselves. You know, whichever of the two is favored by the audience you are trying to appeal to. But as usual, I am just going to come in and make the correct conclusion, which is that everyone here sucks. Yeah, the DM is an obsessive control freak who likely has some weird fantasy of being an old school DM, like they've heard the tales of absolute dungeon master authority and instant death traps and just constantly beating down the players for no reason other than to assert your dominance over them and the players being grateful for the experience. And then that attitude is butting up against players who are putting a sub-minimal amount of effort into the game while also expecting the Dungeon Master to perform at a professional on-demand level. Honestly, I get the impression from some of the rules that some of the players don't actually even want to play D&D, they just don't want to be excluded from a social activity. Overall, this does seem to be just a classic case of a bunch of shitty people being shitty to each other because nobody else will put up with them. Like, yeah, this whole Ultimatum 44 rules is much more a this is why I'm not running the game anymore than it is a this is how we get back on track, just presented in a way where they get to blame the players for ending the game by being unreasonable and not agreeing to their 44 rules. But also posting those rules on Reddit in a smug way that seems to clearly suggest you are expecting everyone to jump to your defense, and then posting them to a different subreddit a day later, and eventually just deleting both posts after it turns out that no, most people do not see you as faultless in the situation, is also an asshole move. There are no good guys or bad guys in this situation, just a group of horrible people who, for whatever reason, have not realized that they hate each other yet. And thank you for watching. If you enjoy my content, you can follow me on Blue Sky, Twitter, even Tumblr. Especially Tumblr. There are links in the description. And extra special thanks to my Fightin' Flail Snails, Broken Unicorn, Hasterfan, Omar Parker, Randy Mulholland, Renee D, Stephen Kramer, Toshirokuro, and Trey Adams. If you'd like to be cool like them, check out my Patreon. But if you don't want to do that, that's cool too. You can still hit all the lovely buttons, like, subscribe, these other videos that the dark, unseen hand of the YouTube algorithm has lovingly selected for you, which I'm sure are lovely videos that you will also enjoy. And I will see you next time.